In this section, we're going to start to set up development Docker files for our server and worker projects. The development Docker files that we're going to use for both of these are going to be just about identical to what we just did for the client. So we're going to go through these pretty darn quickly. Inside of my server folder, I'll make a new file called dockerfile.dev. Inside of here, we'll specify the node Alpine image again as our base. So I'll say from node Alpine. We'll set up a working directory of app. I'll copy over the package.json file. I will run npm install. We'll copy over everything else. And then finally, we'll set up our default command. Now, in the development environment, this startup command is going to be just a little bit different for the server and the worker. If you open up the package.json file, you'll notice that we set up a dev script in both of these, of simply nodemon. Nodemon is a little command line tool that can be used to automatically reload your entire project whenever any of the source code inside of your project is changed. And so we're going to take advantage of that as we are running our Docker containers to make sure that anytime we've set up a volume and our source code changes and the volume updates as well, we'll get our application to automatically restart with the nodemon tool. Explaining this with words is a little bit challenging. It's one of those things where it makes a lot more sense to see it in action. So let's just put together the Docker file, and you'll see this in action very quickly. So the last thing we have to do inside of here is specify the primary command. We'll do npm run dev. I'll save this file, and then I'll make another file identical to it inside the worker directory. So in the worker folder, I'll make a new file called dockerfile.dev, and I'm going to copy everything from the first one into the second one. So now they both have a primary command of npm run dev. Let's now try building images out of both these projects. It should go pretty quickly. So I'm back inside of my complex folder. I'll change into server, and inside of here I'll do docker build-f, dockerfile.dev, and then don't forget the dot at the very end. That's going to run the npm install, but for the backend API server, the npm install is going to go much more quickly than it did for the front-end application because we have far fewer dependencies. Again, if you see any warnings there, totally okay, no issue with that. Here's our image ID. We'll test it out very quickly with a docker run ID. You might notice this error right here of connection refused. That's totally fine. We're seeing this message because we are not running a Redis server or a Postgres server right now. In particular, this error message is coming from the lack of a Postgres server. I'm going to stop that by hitting Control-C, and we'll go try building out our worker process as well. So in my worker directory, I'll do a docker build-f dockerfile.dev period. It's going to run the npm install here again. Again, this will be very quick because we have very, very few dependencies on the worker project in particular. I see a couple warnings. Again, not an issue there. We eventually end up with our ID, and I'll start up a test container with that. And everything's looking pretty good. No error messages whatsoever. Okay, I'm going to stop everything by hitting Control-C, and then I'll change back out to the complex directory. And I think that's pretty much it for the development Docker files. So let's take another quick pause, and we'll continue in the next section.